a month ago. It was pretty recent, but she was talking about how we work at GitLab and how you can understand how sort of a career works inside of technology and what that looks like. So what we're here to do today is more of a panel. We have brought several GitLab employees. We have 3 that we're going to hear from specifically, and then we have a Q&A session after we hear from those 3 people. So first off, to talk about myself and what I do, I'm in a space of tech that's called developer relations. And developer relations is a type of job that involves working with developers who are using the product of the company. So companies like Microsoft have developer relations because Microsoft puts out a bunch of technology that developers use, things like Visual Studio Code or just Visual Studio. Things like Xamarin is owned by Microsoft, and that's a language that you can write in. And when they have these products, they want developers to know how to use them. So they have this position called developer relations, or DevRel for short. And what our job is to show developers and people who want to code and people who want to work in tech and do things with technology, who want to make apps and make all these amazing things that we see in our lives, we show them how our product can help them. Now, within developer relations or DevRel, there's a lot of different types of DevRels. There's just, I'm a DevRel, or I'm a developer evangelist, which is what we have at GitLab, or we have developer advocates, or we have developer, there's community involvement, and there's a lot of different titles that work under it, but it's all under this big umbrella DevRel. Now, I'm an education evangelist, meaning I don't work with developers who are already at a company and are making the apps. I work with people who are learning how to make apps. And so my developer is usually a student or a professor who's teaching students. So that's who I focus on in my job. And I have to know a little bit how to code. I certainly have to know how GitLab works because I'm trying to convince them that they should be using GitLab. And that's what my job is. That's part of why I'm here with y'all, is because I'm trying to convince y'all that GitLab is amazing. And I don't have to work that hard with We Think Code to convince you that GitLab is amazing. But that's why I'm here. And I'm here to host a bunch of people who actually do the real work, the real coding and the real developer work. And we're here to hear from them because they want to talk about their experience in their careers. And we have, today, we have Megan Philo, who's a front-end engineer. We have Steve as a party, who's an SRE, and he'll tell you more about what that means. And we have Hannah Suter, who's a product manager. And these are the 3 people that, I think those are the 3 people that we're going to be hearing from today. I want to double check and make sure on my list real quick because I'm forgetful sometimes. Nope, Megan, Hannah, and Steve. So what they're going to do is they're each going to take about 10 minutes. And they're going to tell you a little bit about their work, what they do. They might share their screen and show you what their workflow looks like a little bit. So you can get a sense of what it is that they do and what it is that you'll be doing once you graduate as well. So first up is going to be Megan Philo, who I'm very fond of and I'm very excited to have here today. So Megan, feel free to take it away and to share your screen if you'd like and tell us all about what it is that you do.
Sure. Thank you, PJ. I'm really happy to be here today, so thanks for having me. As you said, I'm Megan. I'm a front-end engineer on the digital experience team here at GitLab. I'm actually pretty new to the company. I joined not even 3 months ago. And so I'm new to the company, and I'm also fresh in my career as a developer. I just entered like my 3rd year. So as for the digital experience team, I do not work on the GitLab product itself. I actually work on the marketing site, and I can show that to you. Can you guys see my screen okay?
Not right now.
Okay. Let's try that again. There. All right. So the marketing site, about.gitlab.com, it's pretty cool. We have over 1 million folks visiting the site every month. Before working at GitLab, I've never worked on a site with that much traffic. So it really feels like what we do on the team matters because it impacts so many people. And a lot goes into this because our goal is to educate prospective customers to learn that GitLab is going to solve all their problems, right? And this page is huge. There's hundreds of pages to educate folks, but the end goal is that we want customers to kind of go down a funnel and become buying customers. So as they get more and more educated, maybe they land on a page for the first time and they have this awareness of GitLab. We want them to ultimately hit that buy button and become a paid customer. And a lot goes into that, not just developing, right? This is all coded, but every little piece of content on this site is like meticulously placed to serve our goal, right? So SEO, search engine optimization, is super important. We want people that might Google what is DevOps to maybe land on our page. Analytics, we're constantly looking at page views, clicks, all that kind of stuff to see what's working, what's not working, where we're winning and where we could learn more from. Content, we have a whole content team dedicated to words. I am not a wordsmith, I just code. So I'm glad there's some folks that just tell me what to type and it sounds good. Brand, oh, wow, brand is so big. I mean, look at our Tanuki everywhere. Brand goes a long way. It's on a t-shirt. That builds that awareness that we need to drive people down that funnel. So those aspects are really important in a front-end role when it comes to marketing sites. Knowing search engine optimization, just how to kind of interpret data in analytics, things like A/B testing. And not only that, but when it comes to our tech stack, we use, as a front-end engineer, there's your basic HTML, CSS, JavaScript, but we actually use it in the form of Vue, which is a JavaScript framework. On top of that is another layer called Nuxt, which helps us write gigantic sites using Vue. It kind of helps us streamline that. And another layer on top of that, we use TypeScript. I'm not a fan of it right now because I'm very new to it, but everyone I know that loves it has a lot of experience with it. So I hope to be a TypeScript evangelist someday. That's a super important language to learn. We also dip our toes into YAML and Markdown. A lot of this content, we don't enter in the code ourselves as a developer. Let's say there's a typo, like faster is spelled wrong. I have more things to do than go into the code and update a word or fix a typo or remove stuff. We actually empower all team members at GitLab to edit the content themselves. So we have what's called Markdown files and YAML files, and they can go right in there and edit the content themselves, and it works. So that talk about efficiency and streamlined. So on top of that, for our stack, we use Node and Yarn as package managers. It's developer choice, but that's extremely important to learn as we have Node packages or Yarn packages. And of course, Git. You got to know Git, especially if you work at GitLab. That helps us collaborate and as a group, but as like a sole developer, it can save your butt if you get into trouble. So learn Git if you're not familiar with it. Before I go more into sharing some projects I've been working on, I kind of touched upon our stack and just like what kind of makes me successful in this role, the stack, and just kind of knowing like SEO, analytics, that kind of stuff. But soft skills are very important. You can teach anyone how to code, but soft skills are kind of harder to learn. If you're not familiar with our GitLab credit values, I think that embodies like soft skills so well. Like you need to be able to collaborate with other people, even if they do not speak code. You need to be able to interpret code into like layman's terms, or vice versa, take requirements and turn them into code. You need to be able to iterate and be efficient and drive towards results, and yeah, just be a good person all around, I think helps. So again, you can teach anyone to code, but if you don't have the soft skills, you're not like a pleasure to work with, and it might be harder to get a job. But enough talking. I'll show you a bit of what I've been working on. One of our main initiatives right now on the digital experience team is to, we're migrating repositories and tech stacks. So some of our older pages on the marketing site are built with Ruby on Rails and Yaml. I am not familiar with Ruby on Rails, but I learned about it here. It's pretty fun to use. But now we're moving it all to a new tech stack of Vue and Nuxt. And I had not known Vue coming here. I was a React developer, but because I understood those fundamentals of HTML, CSS, JavaScript, I was able to catch on really fast. So it's all super fun to use. So we're migrating pages to our new tech stack to make it way more efficient and just faster to get to market. So one page I've been working on, and keep in mind it is not done, so it's a work in progress. I'm working on the updated customers page, and this is what it looks like now. It looks very different than our homepage, if you might notice. If you take a look at about gitlab.com and search through the pages, you might see little things like confetti and a lot of purple and orange and yellow. We have some of it here, but this doesn't look like the rest of our site. So we've been working on style guides and design systems to kind of streamline this development and keep our design and style throughout the site very consistent. We have so many people here at GitLab, and those outside the company can also contribute to our site. We want to make sure that with everyone touching this, it scales well and the code is still organized. So with that, we have all of our guides and components, Vue components. But so in my day-to-day, every day is different. This is like just one type of piece of work that I get to work on every day, but this is like the stuff I love. So here's this program called Figma, and our designers are very, very talented, and they build this stuff up for us. So this is what we want the page to look like. And this is kind of like a wireframe with dummy text because we don't write content. There's a whole team to write content for us. So we just want to get this skeleton working. So it looks like we have a header type of section, and looks like as you click these, this information is going to change. A carousel, filtered. Wow. So all of these case studies, you need to be able to filter by many things. That's going to be a challenging logic right there. Looks like some pull quotes, some more cards here, some blog posts, kind of a shadow text box, and a call to action. So I've been working on this since last week, and I've been out on PTO for a few days, so it's not quite done, but it's come a long way from this. I remember that. So this is my local environment so far. And so, yeah, we actually got some content too. So it's not just dummy stuff, but so over the course of the past week and a half, worked on these Vue components that work, animations, all that fun little stuff that people love. We have our little carousel. That was tough. And then right now I'm working on this filter area. So I worked more on functionality than how it looks right now. So hence the super ugly drop downs. But I've never made something like this before, and it was tricky, but I learned a lot in the process. So let's filter by mid-market company sizes. All those are, let's do education. So let's do one that's like really apparent. There's so many in here. How about just education? Okay, so they changed. So our filter works. So I've been working on that right now, very challenging. But the rest of it looks good. Focus on accessibility. PJ, I see your hand up. Am I running out of time? Oh, you're clapping. Okay, thanks. Thank you. As a front-end engineer, we can't just develop things and forget about it. There's a lot of things you have to focus on, especially accessibility. And I think that it encompasses a lot. It's not just folks that may have to use screen readers, which is super important to cater your site to anyone that uses assistive technology, even though you might not. Accessibility goes for people that might not have great internet speeds or use a different screen size like a mobile device. Your site needs to be accessible to anyone and everyone. So I have a very I'm very passionate about that. So when I do my work, I make sure that I'm testing with a screen reader. I'm testing on an iPad, on a smart device, all different screen sizes. Because just because it looks good for a desktop and I can read it doesn't mean someone else can, right? That was something in the beginning of my career I didn't know about. And as I got more educated on it, like I realized a lot of other folks don't know about it. So if anyone's going into a career of web development, please cater to everyone, no matter what, when you do this kind of stuff. But I realize this was all very fast, but PJ, how much time do I have? Because I have plenty to show, but I want to make sure.
Really, this has been a really good overview so far.
Cool.
It's we were gonna do just about 10 minutes, so you're right at 10 minutes right now.
Okay.
But I do want to say it's really cool that you showed us like your local environment. Like if y'all look up at her browser address bar, it says localhost 300/customers. Like this website that we're looking at is running on her computer so that she can see what changes she's made. Like there it is in her node terminal. That's amazing. Also, congratulations on the on being given that challenge of the sorting mechanism and those drop down menus. And you said you hadn't done anything like that before?
No, thankfully there's many tutorials on the internet of people doing similar things. So while no one has the exact solution I need, I could pick and choose like, oh, that'll work really well, or oh, this is going to make things a lot easier for me. So it's a lot of that and asking questions of my team members that have done similar things. So asking questions is like, you're not expected to know everything. I would not have a job if I had to know everything. So
me either.
Ask questions, even if you think they're dumb.
Yeah, and Gina put a question in Zoom as well. What exactly goes into devising a style guide, and how do you determine what goes in it? And how many levels of the company are involved in those decisions? Now, I know you said earlier that you're not a designer necessarily, but how many other teams are involved in just getting to the point where you've got like an actual wireframe on Figma to look at and make look like that?
Sure. So our designers do all of this, and they work with the brand team extensively. So again, our site looks different than the GitLab product. So we kind of have the power to make our own. We're not really asking others for permission. Like, can we use confetti? Like, this is our site. Like this, we own this. It's our job to make it look good. So trust us. We have style guides, but most importantly, for a developer, we have design system, and we have one called Slippers. And if you speak with someone that works on the GitLab product, there is a design system called Pajamas. So hence the name. And we have like atomic components that we create in this design system that were given to by our designers. And like we have a button, and these are the props it takes in. And like, this is what it's going to look like. So that helps, but really it's the way I like to work is we get these wireframes and they're pixel perfect. Like I know that when I click on this, I need the header and this card to be like 65 pixels away from each other. Like that is so helpful. But I'm not a designer, so I can't speak like beginning to end, but this is from like my Cliff high overview, like what I see goes on.
Even just knowing that there's a brand team who makes the decision about how things are going to look, a design team that designs them to brand specifications, and then a front end team that makes it look correct down to the very pixel distance between two objects. Fantastic. Thank you so much, Megan. Stick around. We're going to do that Q&A at the end afterwards. But up next, talking to everyone is going to be Hannah Suter, a product management, and she's going to tell us all about her job and what it is that she does. Take it away, Hannah.
Awesome. Thanks, PJ. Hi, everyone. I'm Hannah Suter. I'm a product manager here at GitLab. Specifically, I work on authentication and authorization. The way GitLab kind of works is that we have product managers along sort of each stage of the DevOps lifecycle. And then we have some product managers that overlook more of like the platform level components that span the whole product. That would be my team and me, because needing to log in and authenticate something that spans the entire product. I've been in tech now for, gosh, I guess 10 years or so. I started out after school working as a QA engineer. I asked if I could switch to be a software engineer after a few years, so I coded for a couple years. And then I started asking a lot of questions about, why are we doing this? Can I talk to the customer? Can I understand why we're doing this instead of that? And then someone pulled me aside and was like, if you're actually interested in this stuff, maybe product management would be a good fit for you. So that's where I've been ever since. I've been here at GitLab since August of last year. And my role, I'm embedded with a development team of engineers. So I have front-end engineers on my team, back-end engineers on my team, a QA engineer, a tech writer, and then I'm the sole product manager. And then we also have an engineering lead. So there's about 10 or so, give or take, in my team. And what my job is to sort of set the direction for the team. So how do the developers know that what we're working on is the right thing to be working on right now? We have so many conflicting priorities. How do we make the decision on which direction we're headed, both short-term and long-term, to help meet some of our company goals? So I interface both with the engineers about half the time, and then my other half of my time is spent interfacing with customers, talking to them and making sure we're on the right track, doing validation. I work with a UX designer a lot to make sure we're taking what we hear from customers gets translated into those designs. And then I also work with internal stakeholders who, technical account managers, solutions architects, people who need to understand more in depth how the product is supposed to work and how it's supposed to solve customer problems. So what I like about this role is that I get to kind of keep one foot in the technical and understand on a technical level what's going on. I'm sort of able to look at code and understand what's going on. And then I have 1 foot more in the business world. I do a lot of presenting our roadmap, doing discovery with customers, and what I like. So I like the varied nature of my job, and that no 2 days are alike, and that I get to be a little bit social because I do like talking to people. So I'm not heads down coding all day either, which I like. Let me go ahead and show you a little bit of what my work looks like. It manifests in a lot of different ways. So here's something I'm working on right now. We're looking to add a new ability in our product. To GitLab currently has 5 static roles. We've gotten a lot of feedback from customers that they want to create their own roles. I've talked to 12 customers so far about this, and I've put together what we call an opportunity canvas. This kind of summarizes all of the research I've done. And what I'll do actually after this is presenting this to product leadership, engineering leadership. And before we go ahead and put all of our engineering resources into this new feature, everyone's going to kind of sign off and agree that they understand why we're doing this and that it's worthwhile to do. So this is taking a lot, it's synthesizing a lot of information from customer interviews, from market research, what do our competitors do, and then presenting it in a concise way here in this opportunity canvas. Here's some more mock-ups. So I worked with our UX designer to come up with these. These are not pixel perfect, right? These are kind of the phase before we get to the pixel perfect. These are still draft wireframes that we can show to customers. We click through the flow with them. We say, here's what we're thinking, what's your feedback? Because it doesn't make sense to get something down to that pixel perfect level until we're really sure about it. So these are the mocks that my UX designer and I use when we're in meetings with customers about this new feature, to walk them through and see how they feel and if they have any feedback on our new roles and permissions. And this just shows being able to assign a new role here to a user. Keeping with the same feature, this is the epic. So this is like the highest level sort of requirements we have. And I summarized what we've learned in our UX research and kind of how what we learned in the research translates to different requirements that our developers have to implement. And this is a very big feature, so there's a whole lot. It's my job to break this down into iterations. At GitLab, we try to do really small changes quickly. So I've suggested a few iterations here of how we can do this, get it in front of customers and get feedback on it quickly. And then it's also my job to take this big feature epic, right, and break it down into smaller consumable chunks. So a developer doesn't pick up this epic, they would pick up these issues that are underneath the epic. And these are something that can be done in a milestone or sprint, however you would term that. And the last thing I'll show is more general. So I've talked a lot about this new feature we're building, but in general, we have a lot of things we're working on at a given time. And it's my job as the product manager to carve out our planning. And it's a collaborative process. What I do is I put in priority order all of the things that I know we need to work on in a given milestone. And then I work with the engineers and they say, hey, actually, I think this is more important, or I know we can't get that done until this is unblocked by another team. So this is a very fluid sort of conversation that happens before we get ready to work on a milestone. And at this point, we started our milestone last week. So things are pretty much pretty set. It won't change too much from here, but it's my job to kind of say, hey team, here's what I think we should work on, and then solicit their feedback, and then we iterate on it from there. So this is kind of like the plan for the next month of what my team is going to be working on.
But I got a little preview of 14.10 here. That's pretty exciting.
Don't hold me to it. But
14.10 is a release for GitLab. What 14.9 was like yesterday, 2 days ago?
Yeah, the 22nd is when we released it. Yep. And I know I'm at time, so that's what I'll share about the product manager role.
Awesome. And like even in your very title, it says manager, but you're not a manager of people the way that people might think of what a manager does in a business. You're a manager of product and projects, really. You're like, this is what we need to focus on, and you help people stay focused as opposed to like people work like a manager would do. Is that right when I say that?
Exactly. So I have manager in my title, but I'm technically an individual contributor. I'm no one's manager. But where product has kind of an interesting role is that we have to influence without being someone's manager. So I don't dictate anything to anyone, but I still have to get my team on board with my vision, right? And say, this is why I think it's important that we're working on what we do. This is the impact you're going to have on our customers, and really bring like a sense of meaning and influence to the team.
And then we had a question from Nwabisa. The biggest part of the role is research, right? Would you say that's correct?
I would say that's half of it, right? Is probably the more external interaction with customers, competitor research, making sure I'm on top of my game in terms of understanding the authentication and authorization landscape and how GitLab plays into that. And then the other half is really more internal facing and working with my engineering team. Every time they have a feature that they think is done, they throw it back to me for review. I look at it and make sure it meets what I was thinking. So I feel like it's half external customer research facing and then half internal engineering facing.
That's hard. That's almost two different worlds that you have to work with, really. And I'm sure your background as a developer that you did before helps you understand what the developers are looking for as well.
Yeah, I think that's really helpful. I try to be really detailed when I write up what we're supposed to be working on, because I know how if something isn't defined, it's left open to interpretation, and there can be a lot of miscommunication. So that's probably my biggest takeaway.
And Megan in the chat said, as a developer, I'm so thankful for product managers. It's nice to grab issues that I know are prioritized. It'd be so hard as a front-end engineer or back-end engineer or anyone doing any kind of coding to have this sort of, if you're looking at everything you have to do, it's hard to get anything done. But if someone's there to break it down to those chunks like Hannah does, it makes it much easier for you to complete your task. I do like, I'm very excited that we have, like, first off, we have a front-end engineer, which I think when people think about becoming a developer, working on a website is like one of the top things that comes to mind. And now we've got a product manager, and this is sort of like, there's an interesting, once you're in, it almost expands to what other things you can do. And this is something that not every student, especially students at universities, don't often know about these opportunities. So I just wanted to again reiterate how excited I am to be able to bring this information to We Think Code. I think it's awesome. Hannah, thank you so much for telling us about what you do and giving us that insight. We'll have that Q&A at the end. But now we're moving on to Steve as a I just messed that last name up. As a party, I nailed it that time. Don't worry, I did it. And he's got some infrastructure engineering overview. Some more. Tell us you work with lots of code. Tell us what you do, Steve. Take it away. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So yeah, my official title would be Senior Site Reliability Engineer, which is a mouthful. That is why we always say sorry, because it's much easier. So an SRE position is usually part of the infrastructure department, which is the department that is responsible that GitLab.com stays up 24/7 for our customers, can handle all the traffic that comes into place. And for example, Megan mentioned that we got 1 million users on about.gitlab.com. The infrastructure department is one of the departments responsible for that website to make sure that it stays available for our customers and users. So I've been at GitLab for around 4 years now, almost 4 years. So it's been a while. I joined GitLab as a backend engineer. So I used to work on the product team. And then a few months ago, I changed departments from a development to infrastructure. So that also shows like GitLab is such, I wouldn't call it a big company, but there's so many nooks and crannies at GitLab and so many specializations that you can move on from one department to another. So if you are finding a passion, you're more passionate about product management, for example, or I'm more passionate about front end, I can move on to a front end role or move to a back end role or vice versa. So I really, really enjoy that. And you don't get that opportunity anywhere, not anywhere else, but you don't get a lot of those opportunities. So what I mostly work on nowadays is mostly reliability issues. So what does that mean? Because that's very, very vague, right? And it is. Sometimes it's debugging a production issue. So for example, one of our pages is not loading, or some of our services are slow, like they're taking 2 seconds to load instead of 1 second, for example, right? And that's when we usually have a alert which pages us and says, okay, figure out there's an issue, go figure it out. And that takes most of the time for us. And we do have an on-call rotation for that. So you're on a rotation for a week. Luckily, we're such a distributed company. So you only have an 8-hour shift during working hours. So my shift, for example, starts at 8 a.m. and finishes at 4 p.m. But on certain companies, unfortunately, for this kind of roles, is usually you have a whole week. So you can wake up at 2 a.m. in the morning getting paged. But since we're at GitLab, everyone is in a different time zone. We call it follow the sun, which is pretty much you're on call during the day, not in the evening. And then when you're not in that rotation, you're working on either maintenance tasks or reliability issues. So an example of a reliability issue is, hey, this service is not performing as expected during peak hours. So we go in, figure out what the problem is, understand if it's a feature that we like, a feature that isn't working as expected, or it can be optimized in a certain way, or we need to re-architect something like that. So it's a lot, it's very high level from time to time. Like it's more figuring out what the problem is. And then sometimes you have to interact with the product team. So we interact with product managers a lot and development teams a lot as well, saying, hey, we're seeing this problem in production. Can you please help us out? Prioritize the problem, kind of thing. I'll share my screen to show you a few things that I'm working on right now. These are all the issues that are assigned to me right now. So I also am quite passionate about interviewing. So I enjoy doing technical interviews, and we're in the middle of revamping technical interviews for the SRE position here. So I'm working on that, so I won't be able to share with that. But this is one of the issues that I was talking about, things not performing as expected, right? So this is one of the incident. Someone got paged, and we can see that, for example, some things for zone. So we deploy GitLab.com on multiple data centers, if you want to call them that, and on one of our data center on GCP is not performing as expected, right? We can see this graph going down. So we investigate why this is happening and see if we can mitigate this problem for our users so they're not affected as much. And then digging into our logs, we have a bunch of graphs and so on and so forth. So we figure out the problem. Right now, we're dealing with our cloud provider, which in this case is GCP, and we're in contact with them trying to figure out the problem. So there's a lot of performance analysis in these kind of issues, like low-level code, understanding how the network is passing by. And these are the kind of issues I really enjoy, because it's sometimes like you're a detective trying to find the smoking gun. So it's super, super nice. And then another one is also an investigation issue, which resulted into me doing some development work, actually. We had a production issue. Our monitoring infrastructure was crashing. We call it crash loop, basically. So it was starting up for 5 minutes and then crashing again because it was getting out of memory, basically. And we investigated the problem. Sometimes investigating the problem is just looking at the code that you're running, and sometimes you haven't written the code yourself. So you get really good at just reading code and assuming certain things. So luckily, I used to be a backend engineer, so I sometimes can get into a mind of a developer how they think. So that's really helpful. And then you end up like, in this case, we ended up opening up a pull request on GitHub for a product that we use, which is Prometheus, which is one of the most popular monitoring infrastructure here. And we're talking to the community how the best way to solve this and things like that. So, and that's like, I wanted to show this because in the story, sometimes it's more than just maintaining GitLab.com and making sure it's reliable. It's also sending patches upstream, sending patches to our developers as well to fix certain performance problems. And also talking about that, this is me asking help for development. So every week we have an incident review meeting where we look at the biggest incident we had the past week and look at, okay, why did this happen, and understand like what the causes, the chain of actions that happened that caused this problem to our customers, right? Because at the end of the day, we want to improve the reliability for our customers. And then we found out that a sidekick, which is a queuing mechanism that we use at GitLab, can just create a bunch of jobs without us limiting it, right? We limit it for our users, but not in Sidekick itself. And then we came up, during a discussion, we came up with the idea of quotas. So a certain user can only have X amount of jobs internally within our system. So this is more, okay, we offer Sidekick to our developers. So now our developers already are doing rate limiting on an API level, but our developers can create thousands of jobs without any consequences for them anyways. But for infrastructure, can crash the database and so on and so forth. So we need to make our system more reliable for them so they can do whatever they want to do, but not prevent users from logging in or users from using our website. So it's a lot of work like architectural work like this as well. And then I'm also a maintainer. What a maintainer means is I do a bunch of code reviews on certain projects. So one of them is Woodhouse, for example, and one of my colleagues is opening up a new merge request for adding continuous profiling. So profiling is a mechanism that you use to figure out where CPU time is being spent, right? It's a common tool that we use a lot here at GitLab, just to see, okay, there's slow requests, where is the CPU time being spent? And here we're implementing a new command, so you can run a small command locally, and it will give you a profile for like, I don't know, 10 days or 1 day, for example, for a specific service. So then we can say, okay, during US time zone, we see CPU being spent a lot on this request and things like that. So then we can make data-driven decisions. And we're just working on a feature like that. So it's again, it's a split between development work and detective work, I guess. I think skill-wise, it is. Let me see how I'm doing on time. Yeah, skill-wise, it's a mixture of things. So GitLab.com is mostly a Ruby on Rails application. So it's a lot of Ruby. We use Postgres as our database. And some of so the website here that you can see here, it's all rendered via Ruby. And again, we use Vue.js here as well. And then we have some services written in Go, or sometimes you use Golang when you want to search for in Google for help on that. So some of our high performance systems, like low level systems. So for example, a service called Gitlab, which is what serves Git traffic for our users. That is written in Go because it needs to be a bit low level and more concurrent things needs to happen. And Ruby by default is single threaded. So sometimes it's not the best, the right tool for the job, right? We always try to pick the right tool for the job. And our two tools at the moment are Ruby and Go. And then we do have some C# and things like that. But again, those are for like the security tools that we have that need to run on a Windows environment, for example. And then all of our infrastructure runs on Linux. So we do have some Windows environments. I am probably the one responsible that introduced them, unfortunately. I used to work on the CI team, and the CI team was responsible of introducing CI for Windows, CI for macOS, and CI for Linux. So that team was responsible of introducing those OSs. And then we are in a split architecture. So most of our stateful workloads, so our databases, for example, are running on virtual machines in our cloud provider, but then our web, like our Ruby on Rails application is running in Kubernetes. It's a popular, very hyped piece of tool, very complex as well. So sometimes it doesn't make sense to even learn Kubernetes because it's too complex and might as well use a different tool. But that gives us a bunch of the reliability features that we were looking for. For example, if a server dies, it automatically restarts. Or if, for example, a service is, let's say, a machine is misbehaving, right? Like, I don't know, these are legit issues sometimes that we hit is like CPU temperature is high, so it starts throttling, right? What Kubernetes gives us is it just kills the pod and moves it to another server somewhere else. And again, lo and behold, performance is back to normal. So it gives us that kind of automation out of the box. And also like rolling out new versions of the application. So the way we do it is gradual rollout. So for example, you don't just turn off the traffic, deploy a new version and turn it back on, because that will be disruptive to our user, right? So what we do is we, let's say we have 10 servers of the same application. We take one down, we deploy that, and so on and so forth. And the more confident we are, the faster we deploy.
Steve, first off, I didn't realize how many different things were involved that you had to know. You've mentioned Golang, you've mentioned Ruby on Rails, you've mentioned Vue, you've mentioned Kubernetes, all of this stuff.
Yeah, Vue we do not manage ourselves. Like I used to write Vue, but very, very badly, and I still don't write it anymore. So,
I have to ask you, how much of this did you like learn while you were a student?
Yeah, that's an interesting question, because I used to study an equivalent of a computer science degree, but I actually dropped out of that. And the reason for that, I enjoyed, so the school I was working with, studying at was mostly a C#.NET school, right? So you learn a lot of the Microsoft stack. One evening, like I used to play a lot of games as well. And one of the games was World of Warcraft, probably some people heard of it. And like the hot thing back then was like, if you were in a guild, you need to have a forum, right? So you can talk tactics and talk game shop, not in the game, right? And I wanted to say, how hard is it to create a website, right? With that kind of arrogance. And then I figured out, oh, there's PHP to build websites. And then I did that during the evening, and I enjoyed a lot doing PHP, but PHP, I never got the chance to learn PHP at school. So I did that during the evening, and then ended up, okay, I really want to work in an industry instead of continuing school. So I did that. So it really depends on the person itself. Yes, sometimes you get the chance to learn them at school, and that is an amazing opportunity as well. But it also comes from you like, oh, you really enjoy that stuff, so do and spend some time digging deep into it. I would suggest you not to jump from one tool to another when you're starting out, right? Because that is one trap I fell for as well. Like, oh, Python is really hot this week, let's learn some Python. Or Vue.js is really hot this week, let's do Vue.js. Like, try and specialize as much as possible. And that can be a trap as well, in the sense like you are just become really good at one thing and you're not really good at the other things. So I always like follow the T-shaped model, right? Where you can go breadth-wise, understand what people are talking about, but then you're focusing on one specific thing. Like, for example, myself, I'm focusing on infrastructure, but I can do development work. I can understand architecture, decisions, and so on and so forth. So
that T-shaped model he just talked about, it means you can learn a lot of things a little bit, but learn one thing really deep and get really good at it. So Steve will understand if someone shows him some code in like Go, he can understand it. If someone shows him PHP, if someone shows him C#, maybe even like R and Rust and like these other, if you looked at it, you could be like, I kind of understand what's going on, but you're really good at infrastructure. Steve, thank you so much for all that information. And like I said, this is not something that Steve went to school for and then like learned it. A lot of this is stuff that Steve has learned. He's been at GitLab 4 years. And what year did you start working as an SRE specifically?
This year. So I've been at this position 11 months.
Yeah. So this is 11 months he's been in this position. I bet, and I would bet my next paycheck, a lot of what you know now that you just showed us, you've learned on the job as you worked it. Is that correct?
Yes, correct. Yeah.
I get to keep my paycheck. This is good. Okay.
Yeah.
So yeah, I say this because I want all of you to know that that Hannah and Steve and Megan and myself and Taylor, who's been in the chat as well, we didn't go to school and learn everything we needed to work in this job. We had to learn some things on our own outside of our education circles. And for me, especially, actually, my background, I was a high school English teacher for 10 years before I came to GitLab. So your path and where you're learning and how you're learning, and it's going to take you on a path, and you'll keep learning as you go on. So just because you can't be an SRE today, which I wouldn't recommend being an SRE today because there's a lot that goes into it, you can get to that point later if you continue with your education, continue learning the way you're doing with We Think Code now, and the way you'll continue to do, just like Gregory did. So,
I'm
go
so
ahead,
sorry.
Gina.
Just like sort of a general question. Many of the team have mentioned, you know, learning things on the job, coming in, not knowing, having to like pick up a lot of stuff, learning through that experience, which can, there was sort of a comment in our Slack channel around that being quite overwhelming. Like, where do you start? How do you tackle everything? How do you manage that sort of newness when you enter sort of a new job or a new team? And does the team on the call here have any tips for sort of learning how to learn, or, you know, how to assimilate information quickly? Any tools or approaches that you might use yourselves that could be helpful to the audience here?
Yeah, that's such a good question. And like, it's a very relevant question, because when you're looking at people working, you're thinking, well, I don't know any of that. And if I have to learn it on the job, when do I have time to do my job? I'll say that like the biggest advice I can have before I turn it to the rest of our panel is to do what's called metacognition, which is knowing when you don't know something and knowing what the next step is. You never have to know what the final step to a process is. You just have to figure out what the very next thing you do is. And when you get there, it might be easier to see what the next step after that is, because you've gained some new information and some new knowledge and new experience. So knowing when you don't know something and don't understand, and figuring out just what the very next thing to do is, even if it's as simple as, I have an error in this code, I don't know what's that. The next step is copy it, paste it into Google, and see where that error has shown up for other people. That's all you have to worry about, is that next step. Anyone else on the panel, if you'd like to say something?
To echo sort of what you said, PJ, I think being willing to be humble and vulnerable and admit when you don't understand something goes a long way. And it becomes obvious very quickly if someone doesn't understand something and they're trying to hide that. So it's better just to be open and admit that you don't understand, and, you know, people are not going to blame you for that, right? We've all been there in tech because it's always so new. And another thing is, whenever I onboarded at GitLab, like I remember being confused between a merge request and an issue and not really understanding the difference, which is like embarrassing, right? I felt embarrassed about that, but I had an onboarding buddy assigned to me who I felt like I could ask any, you know, stupid questions to. So I think finding that person, or asking, if you're new at a job, can I get someone who I can ask questions to? And then once you get to know them a little bit, you develop a relationship and you start to feel less and less embarrassed to ask them these things.
What helped me, because I came in not knowing Vue, but I knew in the interview process, GitLab uses Vue. So I'm going to just read the docs, just understand the basics, so I know why would someone use Vue over React. And I was scared, I was nervous, I wasn't going to get the job that I really, really wanted because I didn't know that stack. But they looked at my portfolio and saw like my React work, and they're like, oh yeah, like your skills will transfer over. So in that time for when I got hired and actually started, I was trying to build my own Vue projects. And for me, I love self-study. Like I code at night outside of work, and I want to build my own project. So I built, like, I just got a dog, and I made like a schedule tracker for him, like anytime he eats or needs his medication or goes for a walk. So I built that out of Vue, a basic CRUD app. And I thought it really set me up for success. Like, still to this day, even it was yesterday, I couldn't figure out something I was working on, the filter. And I'm like, hey, Tyler, a coworker of mine, like, I know you're a Vue expert, like, what am I missing here? And he pointed me in the direction of something in the Nuxt docs. And he's like, you would never probably like ever use this until you need it. And that just happens. Sometimes you don't learn things until you need it. And like, that's okay. What Hannah said, like, you need that, give yourself grace, and you need to have that low level of shame. Like, everyone doesn't know everything. Like, there's no expert, and we're all learning together. So
I really like that piece of advice you said. You don't need it until you need it, and that's when you learn how to use it. That's true for all of life. Go ahead, Steve.
Yeah, one other thing, like when I look back, when I learned the most from certain things is pairing with other people. So let's say, I don't know, to bring Megan's example, right? Filtering, right? How to do filtering, for example. Maybe I don't know how to do that. So I paired up with Megan, and like we set up on a call, and she showed me how she's doing it, or she showed me how she solved the problem. And like seeing someone else solving the problem that you were facing is so much more educational sometimes than figuring it out on your own, just because like you get an understanding, oh, this other person, one thing that I always remember is when I was debugging a problem, I never used to look at the source code, like the library I used to call, or anything like that when I was starting out. But then I was sparring with a senior engineer at my previous company, and I just saw him like digging into the code, the class we were calling that was from a library that we imported. And that kind of blew my mind. Like I never thought of doing that myself, right? Like, and that unlocked me a new set of debugging skills I never had before. So even learning from other people, like seeing how they work and seeing how they figure out a problem on their own, is immensely helpful, because it gives you a new set of tools. Okay, this person grabs for logs in the database, for in the logs, or grabs for an error message in Google, for example, and things like that. So you get tidbits from other people, so you can say, okay, for this situation, this might be the best way to debug this problem, and things like that. So even like, again, having a low level of shame, saying, hey, I have no idea how to solve this, find an expert, pair with the expert, and then the next time around you learned a ton because the expert showed you the best way to do it, or the best way they know of how to do it.
I love that you said it unlocked a skill in you, as if the skill already existed in you. You just needed the right key to get to it.
Exactly.
And that's what I think. That's what I think a lot of coding and a lot of tech work really is. It's the skills in you. You just need someone to give you the right key to get to it. So we have some questions that we were given beforehand. I think we're going to move on to some of those seed questions. While I'm addressing one of these questions, if y'all in the chat have any questions that you want to ask, feel free to type it in the chat. We're going to try and keep track of those, and we're going to answer some of the ones that we can answer best. But one of the seed questions was, why GitLab over GitHub? And I love that this is the first question we got. GitHub is also a code repository. They also have some things that are similar to what GitLab does. And if I'm going to be totally honest, you know what my answer is? Use what works for you. The reason I like GitLab is because I think it works best for a lot of great situations. And I think that GitHub has some use cases that make sense too. So you noticed in Steve's presentation, at one point he went to GitHub, and he was on GitHub, and he did some work on GitHub because he was helping with a package that existed on GitHub. So yeah, they're competitors, but in tech and in work and in business, it's about what works best for you. Why I like GitLab, it's everything in one place. It's a DevOps platform. You've got your code repository, but you've also got CI/CD, so you can run pipelines right there. Security, once you have to start thinking about security, you don't want to have to go get a whole other app for that. It's right there in GitLab. I think GitLab is great because it's one place for everything. There's Taylor put this great link in the chat, GitHub versus GitLab. It's where we talk about the differences and why you would choose one or the other. The second part of this question that I got was, how did GitLab come to be since there was already GitHub? Well, you know, Burger King got invented even though there was McDonald's. Ford cars got created even though there was, well, actually Ford was first technically, I suppose, you know. But like, we're constantly taking something that already exists, and someone says, well, I like what that is, but what if we did it like this? So GitLab was created only a few years after GitHub. I think GitHub was created in 2008, and I think GitLab's first commit was 2011. And at the time, it wasn't GitHub was this big monolith owned by Microsoft and everyone was using it. They were both relatively new. I mean, GitHub didn't become a Microsoft product until 2018. So for a time, we were doing different things similarly. And even then, we're not the only two places to be a code repo on the market. There's lots of places where you can store code. But the reason that I choose GitLab over GitHub is not just because I work here. Like I said, it's a single place for everything. Even my personal projects, I store my personal projects on GitLab. I'm going to show you on my screen real quick for this one. So I have my thing that I learned to code with were Twitter bots. And I have a whole selection of Twitter bots based on musical artists, people like Shania Twain and Bone Thugs and Harmony and Ariana Grande and Britney Spears. And these are just funny Twitter bots that I made, but I keep it on GitLab mostly because of the CI/CD. And this pipeline makes it easier for me to connect to where I have these deployed, which is Heroku. And it gives me a lot more insight into what's happening. So like, I prefer this now. Like, I guarantee there's going to be a time in the future where maybe 10 years from now, where maybe I'm not working for GitLab anymore. I'm still going to keep my dumb Twitter bots on GitLab because I like it better. It works best for me. So it took time to learn what it had to offer, but it was really worth it for me in the end because I liked what the product that I ended up seeing. So that's my answer. Why GitLab over GitHub? We have a bunch of reasons. We have a bunch of business reasons that we can give, but really what it comes down to for an individual developer is deciding what works best for you. And becoming familiar with both makes you stronger for getting a job. And I think that's what's important as well. Did we get any questions? Greg, could you verbalize your comment here? The keeping in mind when tackling any problem.
Sorry, just tackling the small things. Yeah, like I said there, basically, you know, especially at We Think Code, where you don't have product managers or really anyone involved in helping you break down these huge projects, it really can feel like you've got this massive insurmountable task ahead of you, and you don't even know where to start. And absolutely, that becomes part of the exercise and of learning how to develop these applications is figuring out how to break those tasks down into more manageable aspects and figuring out what are the more achievable pieces that you can tackle in isolation. And that's good for both, you know, focusing on a single item and making sure that that just works well and successfully achieving those piecemeal bits of work, but also it's pretty good for your morale as well. Just having those miniature successes in the process of your ongoing development helps a lot in making you feel like you're making progress and you are successfully building out whatever you're trying to build, as opposed to having this massive tangle of here's a little bit that doesn't work, there's a little bit of that doesn't work, and you kind of just get lost in the weeds. You don't know where you're going or what you're trying to achieve next. So definitely a key skill to practice and work on as well.
Absolutely correct. And I like how you called it a tangle. That's how it feels at times. You'll have one problem that you're trying to fix, and then you run into another one that's related to it. And now you're off here focusing on that one. What's it's called? Yak shaving, right? Where you encounter more and more problems as you're trying to fix the original problem. Totally normal. A normal part of being a developer and working in tech is encountering those problems. But then, like you said, the way to get through it, one piece at a time. One of the next seed questions is, why is GitLab open source? And to be honest, we're open source because it's the best way to get people what they want and to get people involved in your product. Open source is a very, very important space in tech. And when people think of open source, a lot of people tend to think of GitHub. A lot of open source projects are hosted there, but it's not an open source product itself. GitLab is an open core product. You can contribute to GitLab if you want to. If you want to go in and you want to, like, I think Megan was the first one to say it, we want people to be able to change our websites, like we want not just our team members, we want our community of users to feel empowered to suggest changes, and if they can, make the changes themselves. And open source and open core it's our identity. We started as an open source project, and then we didn't become a business until 2014, I think it was 2015. I know this. 2014 is when we actually became a business. But Taylor, thank you. Drop that link right there about what an open core model is, so you can know what the difference between open core and open source is. And then you asked about how to contribute, and I've got the link for that. We actually have a hackathon every quarter, and that hackathon is designed to point our users in our community to specific issues that they can contribute to, whether that's our documentation, which this is a big secret. Contributing to documentation is a great way to learn, because not only are you making changes and fixing something that needs to be fixed, you're learning at the same time how something works, and you can start implementing those docs and making it work for you better. That's my big secret for the day, guys. Y'all can take that to the bank. But that link, Contribute to GitLab, talks all about our hackathon, talks about the tracks that we're looking for and where we're looking for help. And if you scroll all the way to the bottom, you'll see a newsletter you can sign up for. And that will make sure that you're always getting information about the hackathon and when it's happening. Let me see. How are decisions made about new features? That is a really good question. Oh, there's a question in the chat. We'll do that one first, because I don't know how to answer how decisions are made. Actually, maybe Hannah knows. Hannah, do you know anything about new features?
Yeah, I was gonna pipe up here, so thank you. So that is on product, right? We have our leadership sets high-level initiatives and goals aligned kind of with the market and where we need to head. A lot of it's based on, obviously, our revenue as a newly public company. That's important to us. So everything, our initiatives from a team perspective are aligned to our upper level initiatives. And honestly, some of what we work on too is the fires that come in from a particular customer who's angry or something's not working the way they expect, and those get escalated sometimes. So it's not always vision items. Sometimes it's, we have to put out this fire of the day. So I'd say it's a combination of those two things.
Yeah, so there's the way that the people who run the company want it to go, what we want to implement, and then we hear from the community, either when they're a little upset that it's not working the way it should, or when they have an idea for a new feature or product that GitLab can have. Hannah, do you, with that process, do you think that your time is kind of split equally? Do you think there's a focus more on community measures than vision? Can you talk a little bit about the way you balance that?
Yeah, it's tough. You know, I try on each of my planning issues, which I showed you, to balance kind of like our vision items that we know we need to get done with fires from customers, with security. That's another important thing, especially in the authentication space. We have to balance some of our security issues that come in. And so I really try to balance it. We also have targets, especially for certain priority bugs that come in that are high priority and high priority security issues. They have targets where it's like, if it's a priority 1, it gets 2 months basically for it to get done before we start getting pings on it that, hey, it's overdue. So that would be another way I look at when things are due and when we're about to overrun our target, and then I'll make sure I get it in before we overrun the target.
So you have a system of prioritizing what's important at the moment based on like classifications, right?
Yep.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you so much for helping us answer that, Hannah. I really appreciate that. The question in the chat, Taylor answered it really well, but they asked, working for a company like GitLab, what do you do if or when you feel like you're drained or not motivated? Actually, in addition to that mental health link, one of the things I was told early on was you are a manager of one, and that means that I decide what I do with my time. because we're fully remote, and I want to make sure everyone knows this, GitLab's fully remote. Every single person you see on screen working for GitLab lives where they want to live, right? We work from home, or if we want to work from a co-working space, we can, but there's no offices for GitLab. Because that's the case, that means there's not a person here making sure, hey, are you working? Are you working right now? There's no one that comes around to make sure that you're working. We manage our own time the way that we see fit to accomplish the goals we want to accomplish. Now, I know what you're all thinking. What about someone who just doesn't do their work and just slacks off and never gets their work done? They're not going to be at the company very long because they're going to get caught very quickly. Because we are focused on, someone mentioned our credit values earlier, the values of the company. The R stands for results. That means we value getting it done. Whatever the results are, what matters. Whether it takes you 2 hours or 20 hours, we need those results. Whether you work in the morning or whether you take the whole day to yourself and just work from 8 o'clock at night to 1 in the morning, whenever you want to work, it's up to you. So if you're feeling drained or unmotivated, we encourage you to take the time to step back and take a second and just take the time off that you need to recharge, because we recognize that you're not going to work your best if you're drained. Anyone else on the panel want to speak to that idea of like maybe a time when I'll tell you what, there's days I don't feel motivated and there's days that I just can't handle it. And so I take an hour and I go stretch, or I do some yoga, or I just enjoy a coffee. Anyone else on the panel want to talk about that, avoiding burnout?
I can take it. For avoiding burnout, like sometimes taking time off is also important. We have more of a tell, not ask policy. So in the sense, you tell people that you're taking time off. You don't ask your manager or anything like that. Hey, can I take time off? And I think that's really, really important in the sense like, oh, this week you're feeling really tired, really sluggish, and you feel sometimes overwhelmed as well with the amount of work that you have to do. And sometimes stepping back is the right choice. And luckily enough, GitLab as a company recognizes this as well. And we last year we introduced Family and Friends Day, where once a month the whole company takes a day off. And I'm bringing this up because tomorrow is a day off for us. So and sometimes that's just what you need, in the sense like, oh, tomorrow is the day off. I feel excited for the day off tomorrow. Then maybe I should have taken that on my own time, in the sense like I should have taken that proactively. And like it makes you think that taking day off is also productive on its own. It's not like, oh, you're working, so you're productive. No, sometimes taking a day off is productive. And I'm saying this, and I'm a big hypocrite because I do struggle with this all the time. But it's also nice, like, to say it out loud, because taking care of yourself, like I always think, like taking care of yourself, like is also taking care of your future self, in the sense like if you're just burning yourself out right now, there's not going to be a future you to continue doing the work. You need to take your current self, take care of your current self, so a future you can do better work than you're doing right now, kind of thing.
And we're fortunate to be at a company that does prioritize that. And Gina, you made an absolutely great point that this is the ideal, that this is what we hope for. But junior developers don't always have that freedom. Organizations they work for, sometimes organizations will push you to burnout. And what would you advise in this case? And this is I'm going to tell you right now, is a hard question to answer, because oftentimes it feels like your job and your money and your livelihood and having a roof over your head and food is going to keep you in that job and in that place where you're being burnt out and pushed to a breaking point. I mean, I'm a former teacher. I know that as an English teacher, I was constantly working on weekends. My day-to-day was full of teaching students, and then I would get papers to grade, and these were like essays. So I had 125 students. I had 125 essays to grade, and each one takes me about 10 minutes. So we're looking at 1,250 minutes of grading that I have to do in a certain amount of time. I felt burned out back then. It's very different from working in tech where you have sprints and milestones and the pressure to make it right. And you're looking at an error and it stays there and it stays, and then you change something and the error goes away and now there's a new error and you don't know what to do. The best advice I can give is if you can find a way, leave that company. Once you've got that first job, once you've got that first set of experience, you become valuable, like your value levels up a little bit. So as soon as you can, if you notice that the environment you're in is bad for you, if at all possible, get out of there. If it's not possible, carve out time for yourself wherever you can, and recognize that taking care of yourself allows you to take care of the things that work expects you to. It's such a hard situation. I can't say, well, this is what I did when I was a junior developer, because I wasn't a junior developer. But Hannah, maybe you can talk more about this.
Yeah, this is something I've definitely struggled with because I tend to put a lot of pressure on myself. And so even if like the environment wasn't even that high of pressure, I still felt like, gosh, I have to perform to this level and I have very high expectations internally. And I think one thing I've learned along the years is that there are certain areas in your career where you can focus and have a bigger impact. Whereas if you're trying to do all the things, it might not have the impact that you think it has. So I would talk to your manager and say, hey, I have these 10 things. Can you help me prioritize them, right? And have them, that's part of their job. Have them help you understand what 3 things can you do instead that will have a bigger impact than getting all 10 things done, but not done well. So asking for help and asking your manager to help you prioritize, I think is super, super helpful.
Fantastic answer. Greg, I saw you put your hand up as well.
Yeah, I figured I'd just add a bit of personal experience with regards to this subject, having somewhat been in the situation before, and you know, as you said, like in the circumstance where the company is sort of pressuring you to do that, trying to get out of there is probably your best choice. But failing that, I think one absolutely critical thing, whether you're in a situation where you're being pressured to do it or you're kind of pressuring yourself to do it, which is kind of where I was, you know, you might have this objective that you're really, really absolutely, you know, there's no reason you wouldn't want to achieve this objective, that, you know, there's no sacrifice too great. Ended up working like 2 work months worth of time in a single month, and actually hospitalized myself. And I'll tell you straight, there is no thing worth doing that is worth compromising your health for. All right. No matter how much pressure or stress people are putting on you, your health will never, ever be what it once was if you ever break yourself to that extent. So whether it's pressure you're putting on yourself or pressure someone else is putting on you, make sure to just take care of yourself and you know, take care of yourself. Don't sacrifice your long-term health for short-term gains, whether they're for yourself or for someone else. It's not worth it.
Fantastic advice. And Greg, there's lots of situations where we feel like we have to make that sacrifice, where we have to do that. And I'm just so glad that you were the one to say that and to speak up on that. Gina, did you have something you wanted to add?
So I think, you know, everything that's been shared is super helpful. In the sort of the context I was referring to is it may not be that the organizations are putting such pressure, but, you know, a junior developer may not have the freedom to just walk in to say, hey, I'm taking a couple of days off. So the context you've brought to the table makes absolute sense. And I think it is about identifying, you know, what's a healthy environment, what's a healthy workload, and knowing when to step away from that if you have the option to do that. But at the same time, in the context of the students and the graduates in our program, just to sort of have the tools to be able to, as Hannah mentioned, speak up. You may not, you know, just be able to say, I'm taking time out. You'll have to request that time out, you know, in whatever way that company requires you to do so. But I think it is just about identifying, I'm struggling. I need to have the tools to ask for help to take that time off. And all companies have policies around taking time off. And I think more and more organizations are, you know, showing more sort of giving that more priority because they know people are struggling with the pressure. So yeah, I'm going to pause there and let you carry on.
I think you're absolutely correct that as a junior, sometimes you can't just like it's hard to, as a brand new employee, come in and be like, well, I've been here 2 weeks. You won't see me next week. Goodbye. I'm gone. A lot of that does come down to, does the company work hard to make sure that the juniors understand what they can do and what is available to them? So I think that it's true that, and we have a question from Monique that I'm gonna verbalize in a second. It's true that you can't always just be like, well, I know I'm brand new, but here's what I'm doing. Guess what? Like, I'm taking care of myself. But there are times where you can, because sometimes that expectation that you can't do that comes from within. And I'm not saying, hey, just like don't show up, it's fine, you'll be okay. But oftentimes, like Gregory said, sometimes we put, and like Hannah said, we put pressure on ourselves. We have to be a certain way, we have to do it a certain way, or they're gonna get rid of me, or they're not gonna like the work I do. We need to examine that. And the same way I said that metacognition about learning is important, being aware of yourself and where the pressure is coming from can be important as well. And so Monique said, would you say short-term pressure for a year or two is fine, especially being a junior, needing to learn and grow within any challenging environment, and then finding the ideal company environment thereafter? As far as that goes, I'd say it's all about knowing yourself. We all have different amounts of pressure that work for us. I work best under a certain amount of external pressure and a time crunch. And it will be like, yeah, she just said in chat, perhaps the uncomfortable challenge might be good for your growth. Yeah, discomfort can lead to growth and change can be difficult. But there's a difference between discomfort from change and the struggle of something new and the pressure that they sang about in Encanto, that the one sister sang about. That was like, it's this pressure that keeps you from going anywhere, from doing anything. And it's like a vice. There's a difference between I need to push myself and work hard, and I need to push myself and now I'm in a hospital. And it's about what works for you individually, unfortunately. Based on this answer, actually, Hannah, I'd love for you to answer a seed question we had. Is there any advice you'd give your younger self that first started working as a developer? I think that ties in very nicely to this.
Yeah, so I think one thing I didn't realize when I was starting out in my career is just how many options there are in tech, in terms of, well, I do this one presentation for high school students here that's like, I think I have 8 or 10 different roles in tech that I talk about. So there's so much out there. It's not just code, but I think having that background of knowing how to code will take you so far in your career and open so many doors. So I just want to commend all of you for learning this skill that, quite honestly, like not just anyone can pick up. And so it's challenging, but I think you'll find it to be worth it. And just keep your mind open to all of the different roles and opportunities available to you in tech. And I think you're in the driver's seat in your career in tech. You have the option to go. It's such an in-demand field. You have in-demand skills and you can go anywhere you want. So I think for my younger self, I would just want her to feel more empowered than I did.
Megan, you're a bit newer as well here at GitLab, but you've got tons of experience behind that. Can you maybe speak to this question a little bit?
Would I tell my younger self?
Yeah.
3 years ago, Megan, I'd tell her it's okay to fail and you don't have to know everything. I had, in the start of my journey as I was learning, I'm like, I have to memorize like all this stuff. If I'm going to be successful, if I'm going to get a job, like that's not the case at all. You don't have to be perfect. And as it's been said earlier, like everyone's learning, even that senior staff developer that's been doing this for 30 years, they're learning stuff every day. And like, I think that's what makes this industry so great is like everyone is, you could be years into your journey, but still at the very beginning. I went to school for music. And so I'm a musician, and like you sit in a practice room practicing the same thing over and over and over again to get perfect. And like I accidentally brought that mindset with me. Like, I just have to code so much 24/7 if I'm going to get so good. And I burnt myself out, but now I know you don't have to do that. So don't burn yourself out for the sake of you want to be perfect. You want to be like the best developer in the world. Like, you can't.
That's right, because Megan already is the best developer in the world, so no one can upend her right now. This has been fantastic. We are just about at 10:30, which is our ending time. I know we didn't get to answer all the questions, and I know we didn't get to tell you everything you wanted to know about being a developer, but I do hope that this was something that you enjoyed, that gave you some insight or some inspiration. And thank you to Megan and to Steve and to Gregory. Thank you for coming back. And Taylor, thank you for helping us out in the chat. I appreciate that so much. And thank all of you from We Think Code for coming through and helping us have people to talk to, because otherwise it was just going to be like 5 people and Gina, and we were just going to tell Gina everything. So y'all participating and being here means the world to us. So thank you.
Oh, thank you so much, PJ, Megan, Steve, Hannah, who's dropped, and Greg. It's so exciting that Greg's just joined the team and happens to be one of our alumni. I think super inspiring, just to see what sort of journey our We Think Coders can follow. And so Greg, we're definitely going to have you back to talk more about your new role in a couple of months once you've settled in. And yeah, just so grateful to the team. I know you all have a lot on your plate, so thank you for spending a full 90 minutes with us. And we look forward to welcoming you back anytime, and we'll stay in touch. Thanks to all the students and alumni who joined the call again. Have a great afternoon to the South Africans and a great day to the people who are elsewhere in the world. Take care, everyone. Cheers.
Cheers, everyone.